Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Three Pines. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Interestingly enough, we're kind of away from Three Pines in this particular case, and I think it's so fascinating that Armand is on his anniversary with his wife, but that's kind of cut short. You knew some shenanigans was going to go down when it's like, oh, you happen to run into some residents of Three Pines because at the hotel that they're staying at, they end up running into Peter and Clara, which Peter's family owns the hotel. So I was like, oh, that's serendipitous. So it's like, oh, that's really interesting. And it's just like, oh, hey, we just happen to run into each other. Not too much conversation about that because it's like, yeah, you two were previous murder suspects. Well, you're also murder suspects in the first case as well. You're also now suspects again in the second case. It's like, now you're back to being suspects again. It's like, oh, you can't catch a break. Because the Morrow family has gathered because Peter, as well as the rest of his siblings, it's Mariana, Thomas, and even the black sheep of the family, Julia, has showed up because it's the reading of their father's will, and it turns out he's leaving, the siblings like $20,000 each. I forgot what Irene, the mother's getting, and then Julia's getting the actual hotel. So once again, she's a black sheep of the family, which everyone's like, wait, how does she get that? That doesn't make any sense. Only people who don't care as much as Mariana and Peter. Thomas cares. And, I mean, it's hard to say where Sandra stands on everything. It seems like she's kind of by her husband's side, but it's like, maybe she knows a lot more. Because this episode sets up that Thomas has some money issues. So I'm assuming maybe he's pretending, like trying to pretend like he doesn't have those issues and that his wife is still in the dark, but maybe she's only pretending to be in the dark. Maybe she already knows about that, because this is one of those prevalent families, because their father was kind of pretty well off, but I think they said like 20 years ago he ended up having to turn the family home into a hotel because they were kind of not in a good place. I don't know whether it's like some bad investments on his part or something like that, but they didn't have like money like that. So he ended up turning the place into a hotel, and that's kind of where they continue to thrive. But it's that well-off family situation of like, right, this family's kind of nasty and got its dark secrets. We finally find, well, this seems like it's associated with Peter's trauma, which I was wondering. I'm like, okay, they set that whole thing up in the last case about, well, not even just the last case, last episode about Peter going to therapy with Mark, and, that stuff was being private. So we still don't know if he told Clara everything, because Clara says like, right, before we got here, he told me about what went down between him and Julia, and that seems to be the root of a lot of his trauma and his issues and his regrets. But beyond that, it's one of those families where the father pits the children against each other. Like, who shall impress me? Who shall be the best? And it just kind of led to them, rather than them kind of getting united over their hate of their father, it was just each one of them just sadly wanted their father's love and attention, and they kind of went along with them being pitted against each other. And a lot of those issues stand still to this day. But getting into the issue between Julia and Peter is that Peter told their father, look, Julia got pregnant at 15, and she was going to go elope with her boyfriend, and Peter was one of the only people who knew, if not the only person he knew, and he was 12 at the time, and he put the ultrasound, a picture of the ultrasound scan on their father's desk so that he'd see. The baby was given up to adoption, and Julia never forgave Peter because Peter recognized, like, yeah, our dad is a monster. So yeah, you want the hotel, you can keep it. I don't want anything from dad. She's like, oh, but don't act like you're so innocent. You're the one that betrayed me. And it seemed like in all this time, she's never forgiven him. And the sad thing is, he's never forgiven himself either. Like, that guilt is there. Because even Clara's like, who knows why Peter did what he did? Was it because of the competition, always each of the siblings trying to one-up each other? Could it be that in that moment, he just wanted to kind of come out on top. Like, is that why? Because she's like, I don't know. Because either Peter himself doesn't even really know. It's like, yes, he was 12, but there might have been some motivation behind doing that. Like, part of me wonders, I was about to say, like, maybe we find out, like, maybe he was hoping that this would unite the family and not tear it apart. Because sadly, I read through that in her face being like, oh, you continue to be the reason why this family gets torn apart. It's like, it's one of those families that doesn't seem like they ever talk about their issues. They just bury shit deep and just move along. It's just like they're just in this suffocating cloud of resentment and hate and buried trauma, And Thomas acts like he's kind of above it. Mariana is just she's like, I'm the invisible one. I'm the one no one ever notices. Because she offered to Clara, not to Clara, to Julia. It's like, hey, I can help decorate the hotel or whatever. I call myself a little bit of a home decorator or whatever. It's like, oh, cool. But sadly, it's a hotel and not a commune. It's like, your sister's literally, she's like probably the only, because Julia's also got beef with the entire family because none of them stuck up for her. But it's like, right, Mariana was the youngest. And it's probably, and she always felt invisible, but it's like, right, and not invisible enough for you not to tear me down. Because she's like, I think she said out of any of them, it seems like Mariana and her daughter are the ones who've seen Julia the most over the years. Because it seems like, based on what she said, Julia said she did not talk to their father at all, which is, probably is the case, but it's like, yeah, why did he offer you the hotel? Maybe it was supposed to be an olive branch. Either way, obviously, with everything being set up the way it was, you can't help but go like, yeah, Julia's sadly going to be the one to murder. When she was outside flipping her dad's statue, I thought that was going to be the moment she died, but I'm pretty sure that's not. Well, because it was still raining when she died, so maybe it was when she went to go flip off the statue. I don't know. Could we find out, like, whoever it was trying to make it look like a suicide did a terrible job, because the wounds on her face don't match, and then you turn her head, yeah, she had suffered a bludgeon. And I don't know if the bludgeoning is what actually killed her, or the statue being thrown on top of her, which the tragic irony behind it, where she was just so, yeah, like, haha, dad, fuck you, and his statue ends up being like the last thing on top of her when she died. Like, once again, whether it killed her, whether she was already dead from the blunt force trauma, it's just seeing that statue on top of her like that, you're just kind of like, the tragic irony behind it. Everyone's got their alibis about where they were, but obviously there's some inconsistency because Peter wasn't where he said he was. He said he was going to go look for Julia because, well, he initially said he was with Clara. They stayed in a room. He actually was around the time of Julia's death. He even went to the statue at the time. Part of me wonders, was she already dead? And then, like, after Peter went looking for her and went to the bar or whatever, could the killer have dragged her back out and then tossed the statue on top of her, type of thing? Maybe there was a little bit of delay between the bludgeoning and the statue being tossed on top of her. Maybe it was a quick succession. Maybe there was a bit of time in between. We'll have to wait and see if that ends up being revealed or not. Irene kind of put on that little bit of that crocodile tear thing where she was just like, oh my god, she was so upset. I was almost wondering too, does she have a little bit of a thing about people touching her? Because Tommy did it later on in the episode. She kind of brushed his hand aside. She kind of moved away when Armand was doing it. So I'm wondering what's that all about. And she was kind of like crying, oh, my daughter, oh. And then like the moment Armand left, it was more like she had a face of like, oh, this is such an inconvenience. And she was annoyed. That's how I read her face. Because she went from like, kind of like teary-eyed to just kind of like stoic, but not even stoic, just straight up angry. Definitely feels like Sandra, Thomas's wife, seems like she might be hiding something, because it seems like there's some hesitation. I'm blanking on her character's name, but I was like, when I was looking, I was like, is that who I think it is? Look, I know her, that actress from The Listener, so I was like, I'm blanking. It's been a long time since I've seen The Listener, so I don't remember her character's name, but I was like, oh, that is exactly who I think it is. But anytime they ask her about, like, oh, where were you and Thomas? It's like, oh, we were together. There seems to be hesitation in it, like she is covering for him in some shape or form. I brought it up earlier about Irene not liking being touched or whatever. Jean-Guy not like being touched, or does he not like, is he very like, oh, no germs and stuff like that? Because I don't know if maybe he has a little bit of OCD or something, but there was that situation where he was like interviewing Mariana and she put like her apple or whatever on the top of the page and he picked it up and took it off that. Like, I guess it's like, was that like his notebook or something she had done? It's like, no, that was something of hers, right? And like she kept trying to touch the screen and he kept pulling the phone away from her. Like, no, I'll do it. You just look. I'm like, because I guess it's because like maybe her hands were filthy from eating that. Like, I don't know. It seemed a little like OCD-ish, or maybe he's kind of got like a germophobia type of thing. I don't know. That's how I read that scene. I was like, that's so weird. I also love Agent Nicole's being here. It was like, almost like there's kind of no reason for you to be here. Because even Jean-Guy was like, you could have just like sit that over, like emailed that. She's like, well, I'm faster than the internet. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, since I'm already here, do you need me to do anything? It's like, she's trying to, even to the point, I guess it's like, right, we've worked with you. This is the third case in a row we've been around you, and your energy, and I guess it's like she likes being around Armand because she likes learning from him, because it's just like, hey, this is kind of because wasn't the whole point that she said it in the first episode that their boss, their lieutenant or their captain, is the one who says that she's training under Armand, so she's using every advantage she can. They're like, oh, I want to learn everything I can from you, Chief. So... But you could tell, like, Isabel was getting annoyed with her. It was like, just gotta go away, get us coffee. It's like, oh, what's the number of the room service? The cafeteria's not that far away. Go get us, it's like, I just want to get rid of you. Which, focusing on Isabel really quickly, she ended up talking to Kevin this episode, interestingly enough. And Kevin's like, right, I know this all looks like I'm guilty because the videos have gone out there on the news of like, yeah, Kevin seems to be the suspect. But he's like, I haven't done anything to Tommy or Blue. But the fact is, he does know who did. But when Isabel was like, right, can me and my boss go? He's like, no other cops. Which I was meaning like, and that implies the person behind Blue and Tommy's circumstances must be a cop. That's what I kept being like, not unless it's Arnott, the guy that... the guy that Armand keeps, like, getting advice or help with the case for, that other investigator. Like, not unless it's him. But I thrown it out there earlier, like, oh, like, this particular footage happens to show them. It's like, did anyone actually see the footage, or are you taking someone else's word on it? Because part of me is like, right, who'd have access to that footage? A cop would, so maybe a cop could easily doctor some photos, or... obviously just straight up make up evidence, because it's like, oh, I looked at this evidence and all I have to do is tell you I looked at the evidence because you trust me, and why would I lie about it? But like his hesitancy definitely makes me feel like it is like a, right. He also said like, they said I could trust you. I'm like, who is he referring to? Because it couldn't be like Arasawa or something, right? It couldn't be her that he was referring, like, who was they? Now, I'm like, who could have been like... I mean, B has her connection to the Two Rivers family because they were both her and Arasawa were at St. Anthony's at the same time, but I don't know if there's any deeper connection beyond that. I mean, like, at the last episode, they didn't really necessarily show any closeness when they were doing kind of that vigil and for... the three boys, one of which was B's brother, like that little vigil for them, like they didn't act particularly close or anything. It's like, I mean, just because we went through this trauma together doesn't mean like we're like tight, but maybe they are. And I don't know. It just, that was such interesting phrasing. They told me I could trust you. And it's like, who is they? So we'll have to wait to see. They'll most likely end up coming up next episode, whatever those circumstances end up being. Circling back to Julia's murder, one of my suspects, Thomas definitely seems off because, like, we find out he was trying to borrow, was it like $400,000 from his father, and he's trying to say it was for an investment. Then he kind of goes off the wall at the end there and has a gun, which, do correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe the next episode will end up answering this, so I'll probably end up having an answer before you end up listening to this, but in this episode, I could have sworn they showed that rifle cabinet and that there was a gun missing. And then when you go back at the shot near the end when he gets the gun, it's all of them are there. Like, I could have sworn there was a missing gun there for some reason. Not unless they're supposed to imply like maybe the scene I'm thinking of was from earlier, like later, or I don't know. I'm probably like losing my mind. I could have sworn there was a missing gun from that cabinet. I mean, but it's not like Julia died from a gunshot wound. I mean, it's like, not unless someone hit her with the butt of the gun and that was a blunt force trauma. I don't know. But Thomas is kind of a little, I think everything came falling apart. It's like, because there was a whole bit that Peter brought up that each one of the family members is represented by an animal. The wolf was Peter because it's something he drew at 6, which he thought was ironic because like Dad never paid attention to any of my work, never even bought any of my work. So, which is also sad too because you find out from Clara that a lot of his artwork is derived from things between him and Clara, not him and Clara, but him and Julia, like them never like closing, like burying the hatchet from their circumstances, and that ended up being an important piece to his, because she was saying like, right, art was supposed to be kind of your escape, but now that used to be kind of your outlet, and now it's become a full-blown prison because your art all kind of pulls from what it went down between you and Julia, and that pain kind of keeps you locked in place, keeps you prisoner. So there's that. Mariana says that she was the turtle, and Julia apparently put raccoon shit on the stag, which Thomas is like, oh, it's got to be me, because at their little thing, kind of at almost like a wake or whatever, they ended up, when they were kind of honoring their dad before they were going to spread his ashes, Thomas was like, oh, I'm the stag. Because I think he was telling the story about how his dad pushed him to like, he's like, yeah, I let my nerves get the best of me, but Dad, he showed me what to do. He taught me what to do in that moment. I hope I'm making you proud, yada, yada, yada. Which I'm immediately thinking the stag is supposed to be Julia. It's what I'm interpreting that as. And maybe that was a little like, because Thomas is under the impression he's the favorite, but, others kind of disagree. I think, didn't Mariana, I know Clara said that Julia was the favorite, and saying that might be a reason why Peter did what he did, but someone else referred to Julia as the favorite. I want to say maybe Irene. I think it was Irene who did. So that's 2 people who are saying that. So I think Thomas is in that situation where he's always been the loyal son, but like it kind of gave him a bit of a complex where it's like, right, I was a loyal son. I did everything for you. I dealt with all your bullshit. He always tried to make it like, oh, Dad was a great guy and how he made me the man I am today. But now it's like he does legitimately dislike his dad, if not hate him, but he tries to keep up the front because it was like, hey, it's going to all be worth dealing with Dad's bullshit in the end. And it's like, wait, he gives it to Julia, the daughter that left, the one that brought shame upon this family, the one that you had to hide away her child from, which she did claim that she found her son. So, and Irene's kind of like, yeah, the hotel goes to her now that Julia's dead, and she plans on giving it to Julia's son because that's what Julia wanted. So once again, like, Thomas is suicidal at the end, pointing a gun at himself, but I don't think he killed Julia. I think it's all like he's put himself in such a position of like, oh yeah, he's the perfectionist and I'm the great success of this family. I'm the great, because even Irene is like, yeah, it was supposed to go to the eldest son because that's how the whole thing is supposed to work in the Morrow family tradition. It's always supposed to go to the eldest son and not to Julia, who is the eldest daughter, but still. So now it's a situation of, I think he finally snapped because it's just everything, this facade he's kind of created for himself, this ego, this persona he's kind of created for himself of like, this is who I am, that identity has kind of crumbled down because he's probably struggling financially. He didn't get the hotel, which he was probably counting on, until his entire world is falling apart because he probably needed the money that the hotel was going to bring. If not, like, from just a having it perspective and the money you make on it, or most likely he was probably going to get it and then sell it, maybe. Who knows? Even like his wife Sandra being like, well, no matter what you've done, I love you, like makes me almost go like, huh? Because I guess she's kind of, maybe the next episode we'll find out, yeah, I kind of covered for him. We weren't necessarily together, or maybe he was away long enough for him to potentially commit the murder and come back. But the fact is, it felt like she was kind of ready to throw him under the bus by saying that. Makes Sandra seem a little suspicious to me. The other suspect I have in my head is Maurice. He told that story about how his mom was the previous owner because they've been in this place for such a long time. He says, like, right, he'd rather this place have belonged to Julia, which he even had a conversation with Julia before it was all said and done, the night that the argument dinner that they had. But he'd rather Julia have it than Thomas. But, it could put him on the suspect list because he even said, like, right, his mom owned it, and now it's a thing of, oh, and here comes someone else taking it. So it feels like it'd be someone from the family. So my current suspect list is Sandra and Maurice. They seem like my top suspects for right now. We still don't know where Julia's son is going to play a role in. I guess there's always a possibility of, like, making it Mariana's daughter, because even more they set up the whole thing of like, right, there was a whole bit from Mariana's daughter. I think the IMDb says her character's name is Bean. It, like, she had that story read about, like, oh, like the Gorgons, it's like, right, don't stare Medusa in her, you turn to stone. And her mom keeps her away from her grandmother, and she's like, yeah, I think it's right, because, like, hey, one of them might be a killer. But then also, Mariana was like, yeah, I kind of let Bean do whatever she wants to. Like, I don't believe in boundaries. So it's like, you didn't have a clear eye on your child when that all went down. It's like, is that, like, she's a little girl, is it possible? Maybe. But I'm like, you can't completely discount it, but, I don't know. She's a definite asterisk maybe suspect. I'm putting her on the maybe pile and a giant asterisk by her name. Just throwing it out there for shits and giggles. But it's just like, there's some part of me that's like, feels like that might play a part in things. Maybe it has nothing to do with it. I did like the final shots we got of everyone. Well, we got Thomas's circumstances. Obviously, the last thing we get of Julia is when she was in the rain flipping off the statue of her father. I even love that line from Peter being like, fuck, it looks like Donald Trump or something. I was like, I don't see it, but okay. Well, he didn't say Donald. He just said Trump. But, you got to put the Donald in front of it because you can only assume. But regardless, he was kicking over his father's ashes. Speaking of Peter, Mariana folded the family photo. It's the only photo of the entire family from when they were kids, because every other photo after everything went down with Julia all those years ago were like torn to pieces. This is the only one left, and Mariana was like, I actually wanted to show it to her before like that dinner turned into the travesty that it did. So I've thrown my suspects, those who are my more so suspects, and then my asterisk suspect, but that's currently where things stand. I'm very interested to see where the next episode takes us with all of this, how this case ends up resolving and finding out who's the murderer. I'm sure there's still a lot more this family drama and not just related to the murder, but I'm sure there's a lot of other family drama related to all of this that will probably sprinkle out in the next episode as well. So we shall see. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.